Winter ruled the citadel quietly. Stone held cold. Voices stayed low. I learned to move where I would not be seen and believed that was safety. The Dragon King's castle was built for that kind of invisibility. Its builders had understood silence as something to be cultivated, not avoided. The walls were thick, the ceilings high, the doorways arched to swallow sound. Even the torches burned quietly, their flames disciplined, as though they too understood restraint. The first time I saw him, I did not know his name, but I felt the space change around him. That is not a romantic beginning. There was no music in it, no sudden warmth in my chest, no sense of fate drawing a line between us. He passed at a distance, surrounded by nothing but space. People moved out of his way without thinking, the way one steps aside for a shadow before realizing it has substance. He did not look at me, I remember that clearly. His gaze was forward, steady, unhurried. He wore no crown, no jewels marked him as ruler. His clothing was dark and unadorned, as if decoration were an inconvenience. His presence did not announce itself through spectacle. It announced itself through absence of noise, of haste, of excess. Only later did I learn his name, and later still what it meant. Dragons, they said, had once bowed their heads to the line he carried. Dragons, they said, still listened in the deep places of the world, though no living soul had seen one in generations. The title clung to him like a memory the world refused to release. Dragon King. Feared even when he did nothing to inspire fear. Especially then. My work did not place me near him. I belonged to the quiet spaces behind the quiet spaces, rooms where linens were folded, where candles were trimmed, where letters were copied by hands that did not sign their names. I had served the citadel for 7 winters as a grown woman, long past being new. I learned the rhythms of service the way one learns a prayer, not because it was sacred, but because it was expected. Days passed, then weeks, then the kind of months that slip by without leaving marks. It was during one of those unmarked days that I noticed the change. It was nothing anyone else would have seen. A pause in a doorway, a shadow that lingered longer than necessary, the sense not of being watched, but of being accounted for. It unsettled me at first. I checked my work twice, then 3 times. I wondered if I had committed some small error I had not yet discovered. I listened more closely to conversations I was never meant to hear, searching for my own name and finding none. Still, the feeling remained, not attention, consideration. When I crossed the inner corridor at dusk, carrying a basket of folded cloths to the upper chambers, I felt it again. The torches were being lit, their flames newly coaxed into life. The air smelled faintly of resin and cold iron. My footsteps were the only sound. I reached the turn in the hall and stopped. He stood at the far end, partially turned away, speaking quietly to no one I could see. When he finished, the space answered him with silence. He did not turn at once. Instead, he stood there, still as stone, as though listening for something beneath the surface of the world. I waited. It did not occur to me to retreat. I did not feel dismissed. I felt permitted. When he finally turned, his gaze met mine without surprise. There was no narrowing of his eyes, no sharp assessment. He did not look at me as one looks at a servant, either with dismissal or demand. His attention settled, complete and unhurried, as though I were the only thing in the corridor worth noting. I lowered my eyes out of habit. "Go on," he said. His voice was quieter than I expected. Not soft, but measured, like something shaped deliberately to avoid echo. I obeyed, my steps careful as I passed him. I did not look up again. I did not need to. I could feel the moment he stepped aside to give me more room than was necessary. I could feel the space he held open, like a door left ajar. Later, I would wonder what he saw. I only knew I never wasted motion, never spoke without purpose, and he noticed things others dismissed. That night, I slept poorly. I told myself it was the cold. The next morning, I found the candle on my work table already trimmed. The wick was cleanly cut, the wax smoothed where it had once dripped unevenly. I knew, with a certainty that settled uncomfortably in my chest, that I had not done it. It was a small thing, too small to question. I lit it anyway. The pattern repeated itself over the following days. Objects left where I would need them. A door unlatched that was always stiff, a draft blocked by a screen I had not placed, never when others were present, never in ways that drew notice. I did not speak of it. I told myself that someone had noticed my work and was offering quiet assistance, that it was nothing more than chance arranged by habit. But chance does not wait. One afternoon, as snow began to fall in earnest, I was sent to the West Wing to deliver a bundle of copied pages. That wing was rarely used in winter. The windows faced the mountains, and the cold crept there first, settling deep in the stone. I knocked once, softly. There was no answer. I hesitated, then opened the door as instructed. He was there. The room was spare. Table, chair, hearth, no banners, no guards. The fire burned low, more suggestion than heat. He stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the falling snow as though it were a message he had been waiting to receive. I did not know what to do. He turned before I could retreat. "Leave them there," he said, indicating the table. I placed the bundle carefully, my hands steady despite the sudden awareness of my own heartbeat. When I straightened, he was watching me, not my face, but my hands, as though noting something about their shape or movement. "You've been cold," he said. It was not a question. "I am accustomed to it," I replied, the truth plain and unadorned. He nodded once. There was a pause, not an awkward one. It felt deliberate, like the space between notes in a careful composition. "I will have a screen placed in your corridor," he said. "The draft there is unnecessary." I did not know how to respond. "Thank you, my lord," I said finally, the title feeling too large for the moment. He inclined his head slightly, as though acknowledging something equal rather than accepting gratitude. "Go safely," he said. That was all. By the time I reached my quarters, my hands were trembling. I told myself it was fear. But fear did not fit the shape of what I felt. Fear is sharp. This was steady. Fear demands distance. This did not. The screen appeared the next day. No one commented on it. No one questioned why such a small comfort had been added to such an unimportant passage. The citadel absorbed the change as it absorbed everything else, with silence. It was then that I understood something had begun. Not an affair. Not a declaration. Nothing that could be named aloud. A noticing. A choosing. It did not change the way he moved through the court. He remained distant, contained, untouched by the noise around deafness and fear that followed him. When he passed through the great hall, conversations faltered. When his name was spoken, it was done carefully, as though the sound itself might carry consequences. He never acknowledged me there, never met my eyes, never altered his pace. The distance was complete. And yet, in the evenings, when I returned to my workroom, I would find a note folded once, placed beneath a stone to keep it from the draft. The paper was plain, the handwriting spare. "The snow will be heavier tonight. Take the inner stairs," or, "The candles in the east wing burn low. I have ordered new wax. Do not hurry." Nothing that could be mistaken for affection, everything that felt like care. I did not keep the notes. I read them, then burned them, watching the words curl and vanish into smoke. The secrecy felt instinctive, not fearful. It was as though the act of being chosen required protection of its own. I began to understand the rhythm of it. He did not seek me. He made space for me. He did not summon. He arranged. I did not belong to him. I was considered. The realization settled slowly, like warmth returning to hands after cold. It did not announce itself. It did not demand response. It simply existed, steady and undeniable. On the eve of the midwinter observance, a night marked by quiet reflection rather than celebration, I was asked to prepare the small chapel near the inner gardens. Few attended it. It was a place for private prayers, for those who preferred candlelight to ceremony. I finished my work late. When I turned to leave, I saw the hearth had been lit. He stood near it, his cloak laid aside, the firelight catching in his hair. He did not turn at once. He waited until I had closed the door behind me. "This night matters to you," he said. I did not know how he knew. "It reminds me of stillness," I replied. He nodded, as though that answer had been expected. From the table, he lifted a small object and placed it where I could see it. A single pressed winter rose, pale and fragile, preserved carefully between thin boards of wood. "I found this in an old book," he said. "It had been forgotten." The air between us felt suddenly heavy with meaning. He did not offer it to me. He left it there. "For you," he said quietly. "If you wish." I understood then, not just that he had chosen me, but how, without witnesses, without claim, without demand. In the deepest winter of the citadel, while the world feared him and spoke his name with care, he had chosen a single soul to see, quietly, completely. I left the chapel with the rose wrapped carefully in cloth, my heart steady in my chest. I did not need words. I had been chosen in silence, and in that silence, I understood. I was the Dragon King's Valentine, known only to him. Chapter 2. What no one sees. After that night, nothing changed. That was the truth of it, and also the deception. The castle woke each morning the same way it always had. Bells rang softly at dawn. Fires were coaxed back to life. Servants moved through corridors with heads bowed and hands full. The Dragon King passed through the great hall as he always did, untouched by warmth or familiarity, his presence parting the court like water around stone. No one looked at me twice, no one ever would. And yet, beneath that still surface, everything had shifted. The rose remained hidden in my chamber, pressed now between clean linen, its pale petals intact despite their fragility. I did not touch it often, I did not need to, knowing it was there was enough. It felt less like a possession and more like a truth, quiet, steady, unchanged by whether I was looking at it. I learned to recognize the ways he moved through my days without ever stepping into them. A corridor closed for repairs that forced me to take a warmer route during the coldest mornings. A task reassigned so I would not need to cross the outer courtyard during snowfall. A fire stoked in a room just ahead of my arrival, its warmth already waiting. He never asked how I fared because asking would have drawn eyes. Instead, he altered the world so I never had to answer. He never inquired after my feelings. He did not need to. His care existed in the arrangement of the world around me, not in words spoken aloud. What no one else saw was how carefully he held the line between presence and intrusion. If he had spoken my name publicly, it would have been noticed. If he had called for me, it would have been remarked upon. If he had lingered near me even once in the sight of others, it would have been remembered. So he did none of those things. Instead, he remained distant in every place where distance was expected. And impossibly near where no one was looking. There were moments, small, almost invisible, when I wondered if I had imagined it all. When the castle's cold seemed sharper than usual, when the corridors felt longer, when no note appeared and no door waited ajar. On those days, I reminded myself that quiet devotion does not announce itself on demand. It exists whether or not it is confirmed. It was during one such morning that I was sent to the upper archives. The climb was steep, the stairs narrow and winding. The air grew colder with every turn, and by the time I reached the landing, my breath had begun to cloud faintly. I set my basket down to rest my arms, pressing my palms together to warm them. The door at the end of the passage stood open. That, too, was unusual. The archives were rarely visited. They held records no one needed often. Old accounts, faded treaties, inventories of things long since lost or changed. The door was usually kept shut, the cold sealed inside. I hesitated, then stepped through. The fire was already burning. It was not large, but it was steady, its warmth reaching farther than I would have expected. The table had been cleared, space made for the basket I carried. A chair stood slightly angled toward the hearth, as though someone had risen from it only moments before. I did not call out. I had learned better. Instead, I set my things down and began my work. I worked until the cold retreated from my hands. When I finally paused to rest my eyes, I sensed him before I saw him. He stood near the shelves, half in shadow, his presence so still it might have been part of the room itself. I did not startle. "You should wear gloves," he said quietly. I looked down at my hands, red from the cold. "I manage," I replied. He considered this. Then, without approaching, he reached to the table beside him and placed something upon it. A pair of gloves, simple. Soft leather lined with wool, well made but unadorned. "I had them made smaller," he said. "They will fit." He did not offer them directly. He did not wait for my response. He turned back toward the shelves, his attention already elsewhere, as though the matter were settled. I picked up the gloves slowly, my fingers tracing their shape. They were warm already, as if they had been kept near a fire. "Thank you," I said. He inclined his head slightly. There was no more to be said. Later, when I wore them for the first time, no one noticed. No one asked where they had come from. They were, like everything else between us, unseen. The court continued to fear him. I heard it in the way voices lowered when his name was spoken, in the way people stood straighter when he entered a room, in the way silence fell, not tense but absolute. They spoke of him as though he were carved from the same stone as the citadel itself, unyielding, unfeeling, bound by something ancient and cold. They did not know how carefully he chose what to protect. They did not know how much restraint it took to remain unseen when his attention would have altered the shape of my life entirely. I knew. I felt the weight of it most keenly when others spoke of marriage. Not to me, never to me, but around me. Whispers in the corridors, speculation over meals, names paired together like pieces on a board. "He will have to choose eventually," someone murmured once, not knowing I was within earshot. A ruler cannot remain unattached, another replied. I kept my eyes on my work, my expression neutral, my heart steady, because what they meant by choose was not what I had been given. They meant alliance, display, ceremony. They meant a woman brought into the light to be seen and judged and measured. That was not my place, and it was not what he had offered. One evening, as I returned to my chamber after the bells had rung for rest, I found a note waiting. Do not linger in the west corridor tomorrow. The stone there holds cold too deeply this week. I smiled despite myself. It was such a small thing, and yet it held so much. He did not ask me to avoid danger, he simply removed it. That was his way. The cost of secrecy became clearer to me as winter deepened. There were moments when I longed, quietly, briefly, for something more visible. A word spoken aloud, a look held just a moment longer, a sign that I was not alone in this knowledge. But those moments passed. I understood what he risked by choosing me at all. Every unseen kindness was a decision against ease. Every silence was an act of protection. He could have claimed someone powerful, someone whose presence would strengthen his position in the eyes of the court. He could have turned his attention toward alliances and expectations. Instead, he had chosen quiet, and he had chosen me within it. The reassurance came not in grand gestures but in consistency. He was always there, not beside me, around me, holding the shape of my days steady. One night, as snow fell thick and heavy against the windows, I was asked to deliver a tray to his private chamber. This was unusual. I had never been sent there before. My steps slowed as I approached the door, my pulse quickening despite my efforts to remain calm. I knocked. Enter, he said. The room was warm, the fire burning brightly. The curtains were drawn, shutting out the storm. He stood near the hearth, his back to me, his posture relaxed in a way I had never seen in public. I set the tray down as instructed. Stay, he said. It was the first time he had asked me for anything directly. I remained where I was, my hands folded, my eyes lowered. He turned then, his gaze meeting mine. You are safe here, he said, not a promise, a statement. The reassurance settled into me, deep and certain. I know, I replied. He nodded, as though that answer mattered. There was nothing else, no confession, no embrace, just the quiet certainty that what existed between us required no proof. When I left, the storm had softened, the snow falling more gently now. I walked back to my chamber with unhurried steps, my heart steady in my chest. The world could fear him, the court could speculate, but I knew what no one else saw, and that knowledge was enough. Chapter 3. The gift no one knows about. The day the gift arrived, nothing announced it. There was no knock, no summons, no change in the castle's measured breathing. Winter held the citadel in its pale grip, and the hours moved with their usual restraint. I rose before dawn, washed my hands in cold water, and wrapped my cloak tightly before stepping into the corridor. The stone was quiet beneath my feet. Somewhere a fire crackled, somewhere else a bell would ring. I did not expect anything. That, I learned, was when he chose to give. It waited for me in the smallest of places, the narrow alcove near the inner stair, where a single candle was kept for those who needed light before the torches were lit. I reached for the candle out of habit and felt paper beneath my fingers. I froze. The candle had been moved slightly to the side. Beneath it lay a folded sheet weighted by a smooth, dark stone I recognized at once. It was not valuable. It had no ornament. It was simply a stone he often carried in his palm when he stood thinking by the windows, turning it slowly as though measuring time by touch. My breath caught, quiet and contained. I did not open the note at once. I took the candle, I moved on, I waited until I was alone. Only then did I unfold the paper. The handwriting was familiar now, clean, deliberate, each line placed with care. Come to the south gallery at dusk, the one with the shuttered windows. Stay only as long as you wish, nothing more, no signature, no instruction beyond permission. The rest of the day passed with painful slowness. I completed my tasks carefully, my attention exact, my expression unchanged. No one could have guessed that beneath the calm surface, something fragile and luminous had begun to take shape. Dusk came early in winter. The south gallery was rarely used. Its windows faced the inner gardens, now buried beneath snow. Wooden shutters kept out the worst of the cold, allowing only thin bands of light to slip through their seams. The air there smelled faintly of old wood and dried herbs, the remnants of a summer long past. I arrived alone. He was already there, not standing, waiting. He sat on a low bench near the wall, his cloak folded beside him, his hands resting loosely in his lap. The space between us was deliberate, not distant, not close, chosen. You came, he said. I wished to, I replied. He nodded once, as though that were answer enough. On the bench between us lay a small box of pale wood, uncarved and unmarked. It was no larger than my hand. This is not something that can be seen, he said, not without being misunderstood. I did not reach for the box. I understand, I said instead. His gaze held mine for a moment longer than usual, searching not for doubt, but for readiness. Then he slid the box toward me. Inside lay three things. A ribbon of deep red thread wound carefully into a small coil. A single dried blossom, darker than the winter rose he had given me before, pressed flat, its veins still visible, and a folded letter. My hands trembled as I lifted it. Read it later, he said quietly. Not here. I nodded. The box felt warm despite the cold air. This is how I mark the day, he said. Privately. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw the restraint written into every line of his posture, the way he held himself back not from desire, but from display. The way his devotion chose quiet over ease, secrecy over satisfaction. This is enough, I said. His expression softened not into a smile but into something deeper, something steadier. That matters, he said. We did not speak again. When I returned to my chamber, I lit a single candle and closed the door. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the letter with care. The words inside were few. I choose you without witness. I keep this choice without claim. I give what cannot be taken away by rumor or time. If this is too heavy, say nothing. I will understand. If it brings you warmth, keep it. I pressed the paper to my chest, my eyes burning with tears I did not allow to fall. This was the gift no one would ever see. Not the ribbon, though I wound it around my wrist and tied it loosely beneath my sleeve. Not the blossom, which I placed beside the winter rose, a quiet pair. Not even the letter, which I folded and hid where only I would know. The gift was the choice itself. The following days were shaped by ritual. Not spoken, not shared, but felt. Each morning before the castle stirred, I would touch the ribbon and remind myself of the truth it carried. Each evening, I would return the box to its hiding place and sit in the dark for a moment, breathing in the quiet he had given me. Sometimes, when the work was heavy and the cold pressed deep, I would find another note. The fire in the lower hall burns brighter tonight. Or, the east door sticks. I have asked that it be mended. Always small, always precise, his devotion did not swell or fade. It remained constant, like a steady flame carefully shielded from wind. One afternoon, as snow fell in slow, patient spirals, I was called to the gallery again. This time, he was not there. Instead, on the bench lay a single candle, unlit, its wax faintly tinted red, the color subtle and intentional. I understood. That night, I lit it. I sat by the window and watched the snow soften the world into silence. The flame burned steadily, neither tall nor weak. It asked nothing of me. It did not hurry. I thought of him, somewhere else in the castle, holding his own quiet vigil. The intimacy of it was almost unbearable. There was no touch, no embrace. And yet I had never felt more closely held. On the last evening of that week, he stopped me in the corridor. Not with words, but by standing where I would have passed. We faced each other in the hush between torches. Is it too much? He asked. No, I said at once. He studied my face, searching for the truth of it. Then keep it, he said. And in that moment, without witnesses, without sound, without promise of more, I felt the depth of what we shared settle fully into place. This was love chosen deliberately. This was devotion shaped by restraint. This was a Valentine no one would ever know about. Chapter 4. The Weight of Being Chosen. Winter did not loosen its hold quickly. It lingered in the citadel long after the days had begun to lengthen, as though reluctant to release the quiet it had cultivated. Snow melted slowly in the inner gardens, revealing dark earth beneath soft, patient waiting. The castle itself seemed to exhale in stages, stone warming by degrees, corridors losing their edge of cold. With that thaw came restlessness, not in me, around me. The court stirred with a subtle impatience, the kind that did not announce itself openly but pressed into conversation all the same. There were more gatherings, more murmured exchanges behind tapestries, more glances cast toward doors that led nowhere near my work. I listened without appearing to listen. He cannot remain as he is, someone said one evening, their voice lowered but intent. A ruler without visible attachment invites uncertainty. Another voice answered, sharper. Uncertainty is not something this kingdom can afford. They spoke of him as though he were an absence to be corrected, as though his silence were a flaw. I felt the weight of what I carried then more keenly than before. To be chosen quietly is a gift. To be chosen quietly when the world begins to demand noise is a burden. For the first time since that night in the chapel, doubt brushed against the edges of my certainty. Not doubt of him, but of my place within the shape of his restraint. I wondered what it cost him, day by day, to refuse what would have made his life simpler. I wondered what it might cost me if that refusal could not be sustained. He did not withdraw. If anything, his care became more exact. A passage closed here, a task reassigned there. The world narrowed gently around me, not to confine, but to shelter. And yet, there were moments, rare, fleeting, when I felt the strain beneath it. I saw it one evening when I was sent to the upper hall to tend the lamps before a gathering. The hall was already filling with voices, their echo softened by banners in stone. I moved along the walls, lighting each wick with care. He stood near the far end, listening to a nobleman speak at length. His expression was calm. Too calm. I recognized it now, the stillness he adopted when holding something tightly beneath the surface. His gaze did not waver, his posture did not shift, but there was a tautness to him, like a bow held at rest but never unstrung. When his eyes flicked briefly toward me, there was no acknowledgement. None could be. But in that single glance, I saw the weight of what he carried. Later that night, I found a note waiting. There is talk that will grow louder. It will not touch you. I sat with the paper in my hands for a long time. It was not reassurance that unsettled me. It was the certainty. He was already bracing himself. I went to him the next day without being asked. It was the first time I had ever done so. The inner garden lay quiet beneath a pale sky, the last of the snow retreating into shadowed corners. I knew he walked there alone at midday, when the court was occupied elsewhere. I chose my moment carefully, my steps measured. He stood near the bare branches of an old tree, his cloak fastened against the lingering cold. When he heard me, he turned without surprise. "You should not have come," he said gently. "I know," I replied. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "This path is not easy," he said. "I would not have you step into it unknowingly." "I already have," I said quietly. The truth of it settled between us. "I hear what they say," I continued. "I know what they expect." He did not deny it. "I can endure silence," I said, "if it serves its purpose." His gaze sharpened, not with alarm, but with something like relief carefully restrained. "This is not silence for its own sake," he said. "It is protection." "I understand," I replied. "But protection is only meaningful if it is chosen." The words hung in the cold air. For the first time, I saw something flicker across his composure, not fear, but consideration. He was not accustomed to having his restraint mirrored back to him. "You would choose this," he said, not a question. "Yes." He exhaled slowly. "There may come a time," he said, "when remaining unseen will be mistaken for absence." "I will know the difference," I said. His eyes held mine, searching deeply. "And if they ask you to step forward?" he asked. "If the pressure becomes persuasive?" I did not answer at once. The garden was very still. "I will remain where I am," I said finally, "because what we have does not need their understanding." Something in him settled then. He did not thank me. He did not promise anything in return. He simply nodded, once, as though a difficult calculation had reached its conclusion. That evening, the court gathered again. There was talk. Carefully phrased, politely expressed, of suitable futures, of continuity, of what the people expected from their ruler. Names were mentioned. Possibilities weighed. He listened. He said nothing. And in his silence I felt his choice reaffirmed. Later, when the halls had emptied and the torches burned low, I found a single candle waiting in my chamber. Its wax was the same faint red as before. No note accompanied it. None was needed. The weight of being chosen did not lessen that night, but it steadied. I understood then that love like this was not fragile because it was hidden. It was strong because it was deliberate. We were not resisting the world, we were shaping a space within it. And that choice, made without witnesses, renewed without words, bound us more securely than any declaration ever could. Chapter 5. His Secret Valentine. By the time winter finally loosened its grasp on the citadel, I no longer measured the days by cold. I measured them by constancy. The way his care never faltered, the way silence never turned empty. The way nothing, no rumor, no pressure, no expectation ever crossed the boundary he had drawn around me. Spring did not arrive suddenly. It crept in, cautious and restrained, as though the world itself had learned from him. Snow receded from the inner gardens inch by inch, the air softened. Stone that had held cold for months released it slowly, reluctantly. And still, nothing changed. I remained unseen, chosen, secure. That security was not loud happiness. It was not the thrill of anticipation or the ache of longing. It was something rarer and steadier. The quiet knowledge that I was held in someone's intention, even when I was absent from his sight. The court continued to speculate, they always would, but their voices had lost their power over me. They spoke of futures that did not include me, of alliances shaped like contracts, of visibility mistaken for importance. I moved among them untouched, my hands busy, my expression composed, my heart anchored elsewhere. There is a particular peace that comes with knowing you do not need to be chosen again, that your place is not provisional, that silence is not uncertainty. One afternoon, I was sent to prepare the small solar overlooking the inner wall. It was a room rarely used, its windows narrow and tall, the light there always slanted and pale. I opened the shutters and let the air move through, carrying with it the scent of thawed earth and damp stone. On the table stood a single cup, steam rose faintly from it. I stopped. The tea was prepared exactly as I preferred it. Light, steeped briefly, with a trace of dried citrus. No one knew that preference, no one had ever asked. I sat. I did not drink at once. Instead, I held the cup between my palms and let its warmth settle into me. The familiarity of it felt almost overwhelming. This, too, was part of his devotion, not the act itself, but the attention behind it. He noticed without asking, he remembered without record. I drank slowly. The door did not open, he did not appear. That was as it should be. Later that evening, I found the note. I will not come tonight. The castle watches too closely. I folded the paper and pressed it briefly to my lips before burning it. There was no disappointment in me, only understanding. His absence was as deliberate as his presence. Both were chosen. That night, I lit the red-tinted candle and placed it near the window. The flame flickered gently, reflected faintly in the glass. Beyond it, the gardens lay in shadow, the last remnants of snow glowing softly beneath the moon. Somewhere in the citadel, he was awake. I knew this without being told. There were nights when the awareness of him felt almost like a physical presence, not beside me, not touching me, but aligned with me. As though our silences were facing one another across the stone, perfectly balanced. This was intimacy without intrusion. This was devotion without demand. I did not imagine futures that required witnesses. I did not long for ceremonies or spoken vows. What we shared was already complete. The world would never see it. That was its greatest protection. On the eve of the first true thaw, when the bells rang not for observance but simply to mark the passing of the season, he called for me. Not openly, not publicly. A message reached me through 3 careful hands, stripped of all identifiers by the time it arrived. The West Tower. After dusk. My heart did not race. It steadied. The West Tower stood apart from the main keep, connected by a narrow enclosed walk. Few used it now. Its upper chamber overlooked the valley beyond the walls, where mist gathered at night like breath held between hills. I arrived as the last light faded. He was there, standing near the open window, his cloak unfastened, the evening air stirring his hair. He turned when he heard me, and for a moment we simply looked at one another. There was no urgency, no hunger, only recognition. "You are well," he said. "Yes," I replied, "you are too." He inclined his head. "You have carried this quietly," he said. "So have you." A faint shift passed through him, acknowledgement, not pride. "I wish to see you," he said, "before the season changes." I stepped closer, stopping where the space between us felt intentional rather than imposed. From here, I could see the lines of fatigue he hid so well, the weight he never set down in public. "You do not owe me anything more," I said softly. "Not explanation. Not reassurance." "I know," he replied. "That is why I choose to give it." He reached into his cloak and withdrew a small object wrapped in plain cloth. When he unwrapped it, I saw a narrow band of silver, unfinished, without marking or promise. "It is not a ring," he said before I could speak. "It is not a claim." I nodded. "It is a reminder," he continued, "for you, that I choose you, not because it is hidden, but even though it is." He did not place it on my hand. He held it out, open-palmed. I took it. The silver was cool, smooth, unfinished. "I will not wear it openly," I said. "I would not ask you to. I may not wear it at all. That is as it should be." I closed my fingers around it, my chest tight with something that was not pain, not joy, but a deep, grounding certainty. This was his Valentine. Not a day, not a symbol meant to be seen. But a choice renewed quietly, deliberately, without witnesses. I stepped back. We did not touch, we did not need to. At the window, the valley exhaled mist into the night. The world beyond the walls remained vast and unknowable, full of eyes and voices and expectations that would never understand this moment. And that was all right. As I turned to leave, he spoke once more. "You are not hidden because you are unworthy," he said. I met his gaze. "I know," I replied. "I am hidden because I am chosen." He did not smile. But something in his eyes softened into something enduring. When I returned to my chamber, I placed the silver band beside the roses and the letters and the ribbon. I did not arrange them carefully. I did not need to. They were not relics. They were evidence. I sat in the dark and listened to the castle breathe. Tomorrow, I would rise as I always did. I would move through corridors where no one looked twice at me. I would pass him in the great hall without acknowledgement. I would remain invisible to the world. And I would be completely, irrevocably known. That night, I slept without restlessness, because love did not require witnesses, because devotion did not require proof, because I was and would remain the Dragon King's secret, Valentine, chosen in silence, held without claim, secure beyond sight.